All right, you want to do camera on? Camera on.
Whatever you want.
Camera on. All right. Now where is that? All right, everyone. Welcome. Just one sec. All right, everyone. Welcome to Autism Experience Podcast. It's been about a week or so. I have a really awesome guest today who at one time was a teacher himself. And now he's done the unthinkable, which is become a podcaster. This is gonna be a fun career story for him to tell, and it's also somebody with a little more age experience. So let's welcome baseball coach and high school teacher Joe Ferraro. How are you tonight,
Benjamin? I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. Now, a little bit of a backstory. We had last year when I was going to a bi-weekly mastermind networking group, we actually had a mutual contact who got us in, who suggested us. He's from Gen Z, so he's a lot younger than me, and obviously somebody you had some good experiences with. So would you like to tell us a little bit about, what your affiliation with him was?
My memory is that James Harnedy brought us together. Slim Jim, as some might call him, a gentleman Jim, other circles, former student athlete of mine. And I think that this is a great place to highlight the part of teaching where you said do the unthinkable and kind of transition teaching and podcasting. We're still living in both worlds. In fact, I'm proud to say that at the time of this recording, this weekend I'm heading to another former student's wedding. And it's a really fun thing. I may see Jim there, I may not, but the idea that to have a student invite you to a wedding years later gives you some tip-offs that some things are going right, even on the bad days. So James Harnedy was a great baseball player. He was a great coachable kid, sharp guy in the business world, and he said good things about you. And here we are today. We've exchanged numerous amounts of messages. I've been very impressed with your LinkedIn presence. I know you're taking over YouTube, and
Starting to slowly.
and my kids think I'm a celebrity because I got invited on a podcast tonight. So thank you very much.
Good to hear. So James was one of your high school students, correct?
Yes.
So we are going to touch a little bit on that, but basically, all right. What age were you when you decided that you wanted to go the education route?
I always tell people September 1st, 1999 was the first time, which makes me 21 years old. I didn't know till I was then. People, they teach stuffed animals as a kid. They're in the camp circuit and they're teaching little kids. They always want to be a teacher on a fake chalkboard. I had none of that. I wanted to be a Major League Baseball player. I wanted to, sign autographs around the world and try to play as long as I could and then be a coach. And then it wasn't until I got offered the opportunity to be a minor in college in education to kind of dip my feet in the water. I still didn't know. Benjamin, the classes back in 1995 to 99 for education were so outdated, so low on technology, telling you the history of the chalkboard. Only one of my classes that I took made an impact on me in the sense that I still think about it today, how to handle different personalities, how to build rapport, how to handle conflict in the classroom. So you have no idea, at least I didn't, that I wanted to be in a classroom. Then I get placed in a student teaching experience where I'll ultimately meet James, and my mentor teacher was phenomenal. The first day of class, he teaches the lesson, 40 minutes go by, the bell rings, and he goes, "How did you think that went?" I said, "Oh, great. I love watching you." He goes, "Good, it's your turn." And he handed me a piece of chalk and said, "You're doing the lesson." And he sat down willfully. And I was nervous as you could ever imagine. But by the end of that 40 minutes, I was like, wait a minute, maybe I can do this. He's like, do it again. Do it again. And it wasn't until the end of that first day or first week, 1999, 21 years old, that I thought, hey, this is something I could be good at. This is something I could help people with. And this is something that I could do for a long time.
So you just sort of gave away your age. If you're 21 years old, then clearly I know you're from Generation X. What year were you born?
1977. Not afraid to admit it.
1977. So guess if I'm 39, do the math. How old do you think I was in 1999?
This is a tougher question than I prepared for, Benjamin. So
Middle school.
1999, you're what, 12,
Middle
13?
school. Yeah, I was
Wow.
between seventh and eighth. I was literally just entering eighth grade. And then September of 2000 was when I went to high school as a freshman.
And what's amazing about that is that kind of takes me exactly to my first ever students. That means, even though it doesn't look like it or it doesn't feel like it, you could have been my student.
Of course, because even though I'm part of the generation below you, millennials, in a lot of ways, it's sort of interesting. I have more in common because of age and maturity with people from Gen X. Now,
Mm.
leads me to my next question, just out of mere curiosity. Were your parents baby boomers or were they from the generation above?
Baby boomers, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. My dad and mom came up to visit yesterday. Dad's 77, mom's 73 ish.
1946
Yeah.
was the first year of the boomers. Okay,
Yeah.
so then yes, that's probably why we have a lot in common because they were probably young parents in a sense. Because I know some boomers had kids when they were younger. Not all boomers waited till they're like, boomers were interesting. Some waited till like their mid to late 20s, some to their early 30s, some did it younger,
Yeah.
which
Well
was
done.
very interesting. So yes, if for most Gen Xers like you, I do have some Gen X friends, a lot of whom who are social workers and they had boomer parents. Yeah, that's probably why I feel like we have a lot in common. You're the end of Gen X. I'm like the very first 4 years of the millennials.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, so let's see. Okay, so you knew that from 21 you had wanted to become a teacher. What was the admissions process like for PACE, if you can walk us through that?
Going back to PACE was an interesting thing because I'm teaching in Westchester County, my students think, oh, I'm a local. I never left Valhalla. It's the only high school I've ever taught at. But I'm from just outside of Philadelphia. So to me, PACE was a 2 hour ride. When I was recruited for baseball, one of the coach's selling points was that you're just far enough away where your parents could bring a home cooked meal. And my parents are in the restaurant industry. So that was highly appealing, but they're not so close that they could pop in unannounced. And
Well, no, because it's a 2 hour drive and it's close to southern New Jersey.
exactly. So the head coach was a very old school person, rest in peace. He was a very real talker. He said things like, baseball and academics have to be your top two priorities. And I said, oh, that seems obvious. And he goes, but I don't care what order they're in. Now, every other coach in the world had said academics come before baseball. But because of his background, he understood something that I didn't at the time, which was some people need a motivating agent to get into the schoolwork. And a lot of the kids he was recruiting, they wanted baseball as a vehicle to school and not the other way around. And it was kind of a cool thing.
Because with the cost of college, especially back in the early 2000s, I can understand. Listen. I forgot what the cost of an average semester was back in 2004 because my father paid for WCC all 4 years. Since I'll be honest about one thing, since I'm on the autism spectrum, and one of my aspirations is to train organizations on with being about people with autism on 3 different levels. I'm high function, so interestingly enough, my grades were crap. I'll be the first to be honest. I was mediocre as a student. C average. Now, it's really funny because in the world of business, when you want to start a business, the C students start the business. They hire the A students, interestingly enough,
I like
because
that.
we're the creative people, we're the innovators, we're the people who want to take a risk. The A students are the one who wants to play it safe.
I like
And I
that.
forgot what the cost of tuition was back in 2004. I could obviously look it up, but I'm too lazy and I don't want to. But I know today college has gotten 10x more expensive.
Amen. And
And that's a completely separate debate between you and me whether college is worth it or not. But I can understand why. So PACE was for the bachelor's degree, right?
yep, bachelor's degree, and I'm going there for literature and communications. I'm minoring in education. I'm trying to play Division 1 baseball. I'm getting benched a lot. I'm playing some games. I'm having some big moments, and I'm liking it. It's a whole new world. I mean, I had never heard of Westchester County, New York, as well as people listening would think that's crazy. I lived in a small bubble outside of Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and just kind of did my thing.
So, in other words, when you can't Pace recruited you for college baseball, you ended up coming up to Westchester County, and you ended up liking it because it was different from what you grew up in Bucks County. What was it like to
Yeah.
grow up in Bucks County?
Blue collar, right? My dad owns a restaurant, which sounds fancy to people, and he still owns it today. But he's the cook. I don't even think he considers himself a chef. He's 77. He's in the restaurant today, right? He leaves here. He goes and does the omelets. He's doing the books. He learned from his parents and from his surroundings lean startup costs. People that listen to the show, you know this better than anybody. Lean startup costs. People want to get big and budgets and go crazy and make it fancy.
You don't have that kind of money when you start up a business. I mean, that's actually smart at the start, all the way back when, for a boomer to be able to start up a business, small like that, because you're lucky if you can even access a loan at that time. And it's funny because he's 77. So effectively, I came across content from Robert Kiyosaki last year, and Kiyosaki said, we have it easier because the internet is such a better tool than what they had to do, which is they had to go face to face with people. They had to raise capital and be in front of people they didn't like.
Yeah, great point. The story goes that next door neighbor moved in. He was involved in a bank at a pretty high level, and he said, "Well, we can get you a loan, but you'd have to mortgage the house." And my dad's not a risk taker that way, and he said no. And then my mom talked some sense into him, and she gets huge points for being the risk taker, saying, "I believe in you. I don't care if you mortgage the house. You're going to make it work." I don't know if we would advise that to young people today, but they did it.
No, you would not, because no one can even afford a house today. But
Yeah. Isn't that
that's a
amazing?
different debate.
Yeah, completely different world we live in. It's not overstating it to say that. But yeah, and so it's been great. Bucks County, blue collar, but I was very lucky. Like if you said to me, does my dad have millions of dollars or is he bankrupt? I have no idea. Obviously he did okay with us, but he never talked about money. He never said I'm saving it this way or do this account. He's just plugging away. And so I never felt like I was well off. I never felt like I wanted for anything. Kind of in that middle zone where you're living in Lower Bucks County and some of my friends are much wealthier and some of my friends are not as lucky as I am. So kind of like that. But sports every day, right? Playing three sports as long as you can. You're out in the yard. You think back, like, how was I diving for footballs like I did back then? If I did that now, I'd be in traction. It's that kind of childhood. You go out in the morning. I mean, people listening that are my age will know this is not hyperbole. You left in the morning and your mom came out to the front door when dark came and she yelled at the top of her lungs that dinner was ready. Like that literally happened, like the TV shows.
The oldest of us millennials will remember that also, because if you think about it, just like you guys, both of our halves of the generation were raised with a little more technology. If you look at the top of your generation, most of them probably have more in common with our parents. Like when you're looking at the oldest being 59 or borderline 60 starting next year, and then the midpoint of the generation will probably be around 50. Mm-hmm. And then you're going down 49 all the way to 44, 45.
Right.
Now, the oldest millennial in my generation is 43. The youngest is 1996. So I forget, what age would that be now? Like 27, 28?
I don't know, but I'm blown away by your math skills. Is this something that you've acquired over the years?
Yeah.
These numbers come easy
a
to
lot
you.
of addition and subtraction. It's pretty funny because some people on LinkedIn, when they list their actual high school versus when they got done college, you can sort of put two and two together when you do the math.
Yeah. And it's funny, I think in stories, I think in questions, and it seems like a lot of what you do is think in numbers and patterns of, maybe what generation people are from. I find that interesting.
I've studied Strauss Howe over the years. In actually one of my back in November 2018 to November 2021, we had a colleague when I was working at the Hastings on Hudson Central School District who was, I don't even know where he would be today, but he was clearly an older person. We were talking about the Strauss Howe theory on different generations.
Hmm.
and where they cut off and where they sort of mid and then where they start. And like, it's sort of funny. I feel like the top of every two generations probably has more in common with the bottom. And then, it's like progressively different because when we think of Gen X, we're thinking the top or like, here's a good pop culture reference for you. You watch the Breakfast Club movies, Molly Ringwald.
Sure.
Everyone thinks of that when they think of Gen X.
Hmm.
Especially, at my age, back in the 90s when I watched those movies, I'm like, this is very interesting, with this group of people, because I'm sure this is what high school is like for them.
Yeah, and like, what's a different touch point? Like 90210 for Gen X, or like the early years of that, or maybe Saved by the Bell?
Yeah, I could see Saved by the Bell. It's funny on Instagram today. I just saw Mario Lopez uh on one of the barbecue channels with his friend in California, Miguel, cooking carne asada tacos. I'm like, how the hell did you get this collect? I'm like, Mario Lopez, AC Slater.
There's your algorithm working its magic.
Oh my God, yes. And it's funny how technology's, gotten a lot better in our short
Oh
lifetimes.
my gosh, yeah.
I mean, our parents, technology evolved a lot slower when they were at our age. And like, just if you look at the 2010s, look how quickly it's upgraded every couple of years. You go from when they were young, where you had like the bulky ass cell phone, to our cell phones are updating quicker and quicker.
Yeah, a friend of mine who might hear this someday, Mike, we talk about this all the time at Pace. Here's a snapshot. We took a computer class at Pace, no idea what was going on. The way the class was, it was in a circle. So the professor walked around the circle and she would lock your computer out so you had no access at some points. And Mike figured out that if you moved the mouse at a microscopic pace, the professor would never see it, and she was unable to lock out your computer because you had constant motion. So that's what we're talking
Interesting.
about. We would literally stay on our chat lines, or in that case, we were reading about boxing, believe it or not. And we're just moving the mouse microscopically until she would come by and then you get caught. But it was a great time to be alive.
Oh yeah. So since Pace was your bachelor's degree, what was the program that you did at Manhattan? And was that school for the master's a little harder to get into?
Manhattanville, actually, here in.
Manhattanville, that's what I meant.
But what's funny about that is when I became the head coach of baseball there, I thought I was applying to Manhattan College. They said, "Oh, they have an opening," and I said, "I have frankly I'd never heard of Manhattanville." Again, the Bucks County didn't hear of a small school in Purchase that could be easily confused for the Jaspers, and so I had a big in. As the head coach there, I was taking classes at a discount, sometimes for free. I got a reading specialist degree there. If I can be candid, I didn't enjoy it that much because the pace of my life was crazy. I was 21 to 25. I'm the head coach at that age. I'm taking masters at night. I'm teaching during the day. I'm putting my socks on at red lights to get ready for a baseball game, and my life is like out of control pace. So getting in, not hard because they're saying, "Oh, the baseball coach goes. He wants to take a class. Great, come on in." I did well, but it was hard. I mean, you're staying up late. You're getting up early. It was almost like building a business. I was trying to build a baseball program while I'm getting my master's degree.
And I'm sure that was not easy at all. I can just picture that right in my head.
Yeah.
And it's funny because think about this: coming off a 9 to 5, trying to build a business because similar to you, you want something else at, this point in your life.
Yeah.
I mean, you yourself, you already got to build and have yourself, a wife and kids. I haven't gotten that yet. We don't know when that's going to happen. And even within your own generation, there are plenty of people who I would imagine, percentage-wise, haven't gotten to, start their own families just yet.
Yeah.
And now think building a business, which, has its own, intrinsics, like what I just did here, which has come off shift, and now I'm doing this.
Yeah, and I think some ways to look at that, it's hectic, and another way to look at it is it keeps you busy in the right way, right? You don't get into too much trouble, too much downtime. And you got me remembering a professor I had who did an amazing thing for mental health without even really knowing it before it was quote unquote a buzzword, We had a graduate class at night. It might start at 6 or 7 o'clock at night, go 2 hours, 3 hours. She reserved the first 10 minutes of every class for you to be journaling. So she said, I don't care what you're writing about. I know you're coming from a 9 to 5. I know some of you have kids. Your mind is over there, and I need you here. So let's ease you in 10 minutes of free writing. And then if anybody wants to share anything, they do. Otherwise, we do that just to center us and get us back in the flow. It was brilliant.
You bring that up, especially with being on the autism spectrum. There's a couple of things that I didn't like about the 1990s. There's going to be a story. There's going to be a story you'll understand in here, and this will be for both your audience and my own audience. In the 1990s, when I first got diagnosed with autism at Yale, around 5 years old, the sad consensus about autism is, unfortunately, society believed you were mentally retarded. And I still see that stigma is around on some level today. In the 2000s, we still didn't necessarily have a better understanding of it. And it's funny because last year at my best friend's wedding, his bachelor party the month before, one of the guys that I graduated with in my own graduating class at one point, he apologized to me last year when we discussed that whole mentally retarded thing. When I said I didn't like hearing that as a kid, he said, it's funny you say that because I apologize for saying that to you back when we were kids around 2004, 2003, because we didn't realize my cousin got diagnosed with it. And you're correct. You guys, whether you're on the autism spectrum or you have a disability, it's not easy for anyone in those situations.
Yeah.
So whatever I said that to you back then, I do apologize, were his exact words.
Wow.
It was adult of him to be able to do that because, not everyone, even today, I would say still understands autism, but all autism is a developmental learning disability. And we're getting into like what your teacher started for you guys, which is a mental health discussion. That's also the other purpose of my podcast, which is we're normalizing an actual tolerant discussion about mental health.
Love that. That's a big thing. And you're at the forefront of it. You're connecting with all kinds of different people. And I appreciate that.
It's an important conversation. And I will say one thing with all the articles that are especially coming out about, James and Gen Z now, which is very interesting because there was one thing there's this huge rap with them today. They don't want to work anymore. It's like, no, they want to make money, but they also don't want to sacrifice, their mental health, which is what they saw their parents go through. Because even I would say on some level, Gen X, mental health was never really a discussion they could have, but now they're comfortable enough to it.
It's a great point. I mean, we look at our parents, we love them dearly, but you start to question if you're really going down the mental health. Do they have boundaries? Do they have balance? Things like that. It's an important conversation.
Well, it's an important conversation, especially for Gen X at work, because the entire idea that I think Gen Z got from you guys is, wait, they're taking days off, so we'll just label this as a mental health day, which basically means I just don't want to be at work. They got it from you guys, which isn't a bad thing, because my generation, we want to be able to do things like that, but you could never have that discussion with older generations. Because literally they would just sham you and say things like, oh, wait, why are you taking the day off? I have a appointment. I have to go see my therapist. Do you really need to know why I need a day off?
You're bringing up some, again, interesting things. I still struggle. I don't know what this says about me. Maybe you tapped into it with my parents. I still struggle taking a day off. Like I still have that.
It's because I love my parents too, but I feel like they're the ones who are struggling to understand people today. The wage, when you complain, for example, in their case, when nobody wants to work anymore, I think what they're really not understanding is that work isn't a priority for people today. Some people just see work as kind of a way to make money. But, and then you see this all across LinkedIn yourself. You got plenty of content creators who are doubling as career coaches who are sitting there and saying to people, with their marketing content, we know you want to make, higher salary. But one guest that I had 2 years ago when I started the whole thing made a different point. At each different age, it's, everyone has a different idea. For example, in your 30s, you might want more work-life balance, or you might want, kind of, I need to make money, but I need to be doing other things and branching off, because as you get closer to your 40s, it's probably going to be a little harder to be getting hired for something else. And I remember a college professor back in 2017 telling me this. It went as so. You come out of college at 22 or 24, somewhere between there. Your focus in your 20s is supposed to be making money, and not just making money, setting yourself up. In your 30s, you're hoping to get promoted, start a family, meet someone, buy a house. In your 40s, you're starting to think about maybe self-employment, building a business, or, climbing the corporate ladder a little further. I think what we're seeing with you, me, and, the new generation coming up is that, unfortunately, not everyone wants corporate promotion. Corporate promotion means more work. Me coming off a 9 to 5, you think I'd rather be trying to skill up for a promotion in a 9 to 5 and then lose all this free time to do things like this? No. I can monetize this. I enjoy doing this. It gives me something that I actually have control over in my life, because I don't control getting promoted.
Well said. Well said.
That's out of my control. I don't control if I can get married. I have to, go out there like this, meet people in person, go to different events, and it's a little more challenging at the late 30s to early 40s, because you realize, what do I have in common with this person? Not as much as I used to when I was younger. And then there were easier things to be able to, what's the word I'm looking for? Bond over.
Yeah.
So when you got out of your master's degree, and it looks like you spent 25 years at Valhalla, what was the application process like at that point before OLAS?
Because I student taught at Valhalla, I had a beautiful opportunity. I was a seventh grade teacher, student teaching, and I had received word that the eighth grade teacher was going to move to the high school. She wanted a change, which meant that they needed to hire an eighth grade teacher. And I was like, wow. At the same time, this new test came out called the ELA test, the New York State ELA, blah, 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 coming out. So I student taught in the fall, and the principal had her daughter as a seventh grader in my class. So there's so many business applications to understanding that every day is a job interview. But I thought that that really was the case in my situation. Her daughter would go home every day, and when she said, "How was school?" her daughter would either say good or bad. And then the principal could ask, "How was English class?" And at that point, I'm 21, 22 years old, trying to conquer the world and be the best teacher who ever lived. And apparently it went well, because the reports went well. And then when it came time to apply for the job, I had a very significant in at that position, because I knew every student. I knew the culture. And if I were to get the job in eighth grade, I would literally move up with the kids for my first year. So no nerves about missing names or not knowing anything about them. I would have every advantage possible. At the same time, I put my resume in a job fair at Pace, and I got another call from another school. And I went in to interview through that process, because my parents said, "Hey, you got to keep your options open." And that process went really well. I mean, the first interview was 10 people right in a row, boom, 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 boom. And maybe that was an early indicator that I was going to be comfortable in interviews. And long story short, I got an offer there and an offer at Valhalla. And the offer at the other school was higher in salary than Valhalla. And I remember that vividly because you're coming out of college and you're thinking, wow, if someone's paying me more, it's got to be a better job. And I sat down with my parents and
Oh, and
yeah, they surprised me. They said, you guessed it. They said, you got to weigh it all. You don't just weigh a few $1,000s today versus all of the other positives at Valhalla. And went through the process, met with the superintendent, got offered the job, and told the other school politely, thank you, but no thank you. I couldn't believe the look on their faces. Like they couldn't understand. They're not used to. Why would someone choose the, I don't know how to put it, the smaller school, the less prestigious school, the whatever school as compared to that district? And for me, I've never once thought about that as a decision that I regretted.
so I'm not going to play devil's advocate at all. I'm probably going to give you a reason why I think they would struggle to understand that today if you put them doing the same thing with you now at a different stage in your life. I think what you ultimately realized is there's the phrase, does the higher salary have more stress added to it? Because you're seeing today that if you reject a higher offer, the first thing is, oh, he doesn't want money. No, it's not about the money. The higher offers usually come with a few strings attached. You don't know if you're going to get a supervisor or a manager who's going to basically be insecure with himself and checking in on you all the time. And this is usually synonymous with lower offers. Lower offers, sometimes there's a little more trust. So you may have had more trust at Valhalla, and freedom to be able to do your job. But in a lucratively higher offer, you're probably going to be checked in on a lot, which can get annoying at times.
You nailed it with
Yeah,
101. You nailed it with trust. I never really thought about it in that frame, but since day one, I felt like I have autonomy. I felt like I do have the trust. I feel like, hopefully I earned it, but also they gave it to us.
So interestingly enough, even with what I do, so you see me at home today. I work home 4 days a week scheduling. I don't like I don't necessarily like the wages, but the fact that I can stay home 4 days a week, commute one, which was finally earned, allows me to save my money. Am I going to get this level of remote work in the remote work age anywhere else? No, probably not necessarily, because I've been with the current company in the current industry for almost 3 years now. So I would have to start over elsewhere. I would have to commute 5 days a week just to re-earn something like this. And, before we even get to the numbers at this point, this year, for the last 2 years, I submitted applications to Westchester Residential Opportunities for different affordable housing properties. The one that I live in right now is a brand new building that was just completed in May. Wow. I'm not going to give away the rent because we don't know if somebody might, get jealous when they see this posted, but clearly my income is able to afford it, with Worrell's formula. So if I were to go somewhere for a larger salary offer, there would be a chance that now my rent is going to double.
Wow.
Because you know how housing works, right?
Not as well as you do. I know that for sure.
So housing lottery works like this. If you are not in the income range, you will not qualify, means your rent is going to be a lot more expensive. If you're in their parameters for income, then whatever it would be at normal market value is double that. So basically, I pay significantly less than someone who's probably paying for the same type of unit at like $1,900 to $2,000 a month. So it's reduced. I'll leave it at that.
Nice.
So you have that. Obviously one of my co-founders said it to me, that's kind of golden handcuffs. I'm like, golden handcuffs, or maybe it's just I realize if I'm staying put right now, there's a few reasons why. One of it is this, the other is to reskill, and the other part of it is I'm building something, building a community.
I love it, man.
And those are parameters and things that can't be, a larger salary at this point, like you probably did the math. We're like, I'm happy enough with the high school.
You got it.
So now, if you were to try to apply to be a teacher with your 25 years of experience, you would probably have to go through what I did, which is OLAS, the teacher online application system, which makes it more complicated. I
Yeah.
mean, it will disperse your application and someone will eventually give you a call, but it's like a waiting.
Yeah. I have no
So
plans
there
to do
are
that. I'll tell you that
looking,
much.
huh?
I have no plans to do that at this time.
No, I don't blame you. Okay, so what's my next one for you? All right. After 25 years, you did what I basically put in here as the unthinkable. You left a stable job to do this. Now, what went into your decision to not necessarily pivot, but try a whole new idea?
Maybe this came up in the research or whatnot, but I have not left. This is breaking news here. I did not leave. I am still there. I
At
pivoted.
Valhalla,
Yeah, I am. I'm still at Valhalla.
how many
Um,
years have you been teaching?
this is my 26th, so I stayed for the 26th. I think you just saw all the flashy posts and thought, you know what, this man's crushing it. But no,
Well,
I'm
you
still
do what
there.
I do. Don't give everything away.
Yeah, you're right on, right? I don't talk too much about it, but when I'm working with entrepreneurs, sometimes they're interested in my background in education, and sometimes they're not. And
So the
so
podcast is basically what everyone's now calling a side hustle.
yeah, I would say so. I mean, we have different relationships. People have different relationships with that term, right? I mean, but I go back and I trace it to everything you've been so good to talk about, right? It's like I'm 21 and I'm teaching, and then I'm coaching baseball, and now I'm doing tutoring on the side, and now I'm still teaching, and now I'm trying to pursue this dream. And so it's always been parallel. There's always been something else for me. I don't know if it's hey, listen, I don't know if it's healthy. I don't know if it's unhealthy. I mean, it seems to work for me. It keeps me busy, and
So basically the teacher's salary in this sense, like what I'm doing, basically provides you the ability to be able to chase your dream, at least knowing in your case, because it's probably a union job, I don't necessarily have to worry like somebody in the private sector and I can, continue to do what I want. For me,
yeah,
even though I might not have a union, interestingly enough, I don't feel like I necessarily have to worry, even though there are technology advancements with medical groups trying to bring more AI in, but they're still going to need a human being on some level, even if it's just to correct appointments, because interestingly enough, you have a lot of incorrect bookings with this. Like people don't know if they're a new patient or an existing patient. They
wow.
just book whatever. So it's like you could go to fully trying to get rid of the position, but then you can't because you have providers who are going to say, in ortho especially, I don't want to see this.
Hmm. Yeah, I think
You
you
know,
nailed it because the teaching job, some would look at it as a disadvantage because it takes up a tremendous amount of time and effort. But most importantly, I love the job. Secondly, it's stable. Thirdly, it does provide structure and it allows me that I don't have any pressure to acquire a new client. There's absolutely no pressure. I can choose who I want to work with and who I'm lucky enough to kind of meet, and we go from there.
exactly. So, since you have been teaching for 26 years, what is the retirement like in terms of teaching? It's how many years till retirement? It's like 40?
So it's interesting, right? There's a new tier. We were just talking about this with a colleague. If someone was entering the profession right now in New York State, they're looking at you to teach a minimum of 40 years, which my colleague said today, people are going to think he's crazy when he says this, but teaching is a job similar to being a firefighter or a police officer. And I said, that sounds crazy. What do you mean? And he said, you're not wired to do it forever. It's so stressful on a certain level. Now, it's not coal mining. It's not dangerous like those other two professions, although, and I think that you get to a place where you're just like, wow, this is a very demanding cognitive position. My age group is 30 years and at the age of 55. So I'm kind of in a weird zone where I'm halfway through my 26th year, but I'm only 47. So the numbers are a little wonky.
Well, yeah. So if you're not even at the end of your 40s, you still have a good amount of time to go. And everyone at my age, who's anywhere between 43 to 39 to 36, has already probably been teaching for what, like 15 to 20 years,
Yeah.
depending on when they got out of college, when they got out of their master's programs. I worked in the school district myself and I loved it, but unfortunately, the reason I ended up leaving was for a few reasons, separate from the fact that it was 5 days a week that you had to be commuting. I could the you either had to get certified as a teacher's aide, a teacher's assistant. You had to go. You could become a teacher, but within 5 years you'd have to go back for a master's program, and I wasn't ready to. I wasn't ready to make that commitment just yet.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with healthcare, the problem now is there are alternatives to reskilling, but unfortunately for reskilling or learning something else, they would still at this sad end of the day, like education, they want a higher degree.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the situation that I'm stuck in, where I'm not fully committed to wanting to take out more debt only to not get hired,
Yeah. Understood.
because that's where the job market is. I mean, you got in at a great time, clearly, where you could be, what's the word, grandfathered into the system before it changed.
Yeah. Fair enough.
If I were to try to do that now, there aren't as many guarantees, and teaching, I'm sure, is very competitive at the moment, especially in this area, because the Westchester County school system is top 25 in the United States.
Yeah, for sure. You hear of positions that open in elementary schools and you get 300
Oh,
applications.
yeah. The school I graduated out of, John J. Cross River, is top 25, individually, as a school district in the United States of America.
Yeah.
Like, that school, almost everyone I graduated with went on to teaching, work in corporate America, became lacrosse or football coaches, a lot of different career paths, but they got into a lot of good colleges. I was the one who ended up in community college. Not that it was a bad thing, but because of the fact that I admitted I was a C student.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned, one of the things that I'm attaching to the podcast going forward is that autism trainer service. We'll go into that, but when you see podcasters like myself, how do you suggest branding, personal branding or marketing goes? When you're starting out, because I've been doing this for 2 years now, and I can even say a lot of what I was doing changed over time.
Yeah, I think it's a big question because there's pivoting that goes on. In a perfect world, you have exactly from the start, you know what you're doing. You want to go and be known for X or Y. I'll give you two quick examples. For me, I wanted to do the podcast to learn, to speed up my learning process, to be a better husband and teacher, and just follow my curiosity. I would write a list out of people that I wanted to meet, and a lot of times it was because I loved their book. So I read their book, and I would say, I read the book, but there were additional questions I wish I could ask the author. Sometimes you would email the person and they would write back, but then what if I could ask them questions for a half an hour? So along that journey in following my curiosity, I really didn't think about branding. That's not good business advice. That's just where I was. And somewhere
Branding
along,
is also a buzzword, by the way. What we're really discussing is basically, when you're starting out, what is the best way to market or sell whatever you're passionate.
yeah, with
Like, a lot
me,
of these are just more funny, catchy internet buzzwords nowadays. My generation popularized, some of these, and tried to, you try to change the name of something, to sound to appeal on a mass, whatchamacallit. So, as you were saying about authors, when you would email them.
yeah, I think what ended up happening for me, maybe 25, 30 episodes in, is I was getting very sincere sounding compliments about the conversations I was hosting. So the branding kind of found me where I was having maybe good success, good taste in who I was inviting as guests. It was a little bit tricky because I can't say yes to everybody, but I was able to get a group of people early on to say yes. And then that domino theory helped a lot where If Daniel Pink was on, then they would say, well, maybe it's a good podcast. And then Seth Godin was on, and, Chris Voss, who you see on the Instagram feed all the time with the negotiation, was on. And all of a sudden it's like a sorting mechanism. Whether it's real or not, you get a perception of, oh, Joe has good guests, whatever the heck that meant. Well, what it turned out to mean for me was what I later opened up, which was damngoodconversations.com. And that was the branding, right? The branding came to me when people kept saying, he asks really good questions, very kind of them. He listens really well to the guests. I appreciated that. And he had great conversations, right? There's many ways to define a great conversation. We're having one. But if I was able to do it over time, that became the branding. And then what people ended up asking me to do, I thought they were going to hire me to speak. I thought I was going to get mattress ads. I thought, that's where the money was going to come from. Turns out people wanted me to help them host better podcasts. People wanted me to help them be on a panel and shine. They wanted me to, I have a keynote talk coming up. Can you help me polish it? And I became a communications coach through the podcast. And if you wrap it all together, you kind of see the branding. I'll call it inside out. It happened 30 episodes in. I became known, at least in a small corner of the universe, as someone who is good with conversation. And that's where we're at.
So here's an accomplishment, because I've had 3 big guests over the last close to 3 years of doing this. Last week, I had the Knowledge House co-founder and CEO, Geraldine Rodriguez, who was completely 100% impressed with me. Towards the end of the recording, she actually said to me, every time I come onto LinkedIn, I see you on other people's posts. This obviously shows me over the last 2 to 3 years, you have a really, really, really powerful, strong reach, for somebody that's not necessarily selling a product or a service. Clearly, she said one of the things that stands out about you is, that fact. Basically, what she alluded to, or not even alluded to, what she basically said was, I've been watching your content now for the last 2 years, and the fact that you also came to to volunteer with my own organization, really, really made it a lot easier to get her on as a guest, which basically shows you not just from the branding aspect, but that's just how powerful a presence that I have, with most people. I got you on today. My guest from last fall in November, Billy Samoa Salaby, the founder of Spotify, who's also worked at Tesla with Elon Musk, said to me, 2 big things stand out with you. First and foremost, even if you don't agree with these content creators, you bring your points up in a very coherently smart way, number one. And number 2, you are very nice to them, even if you don't agree with them, which is huge for anyone building something, the ability to just, what's the word? Not be biased, basically alluding to the fact that I am not in any way, shape, or form biased. I just understand, how the world works, how business works.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that. And it's good to collect those compliments, because there are days where it gets lonely and you're saying, man, is anyone listening? Is this microphone on? Is anyone going to subscribe? Is anyone going to like or comment on this post? And you're doing it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I could brag about how much sleep that I've lost over the last 3 years with this stuff, but there would be no point in doing that. But you're completely correct when you go to entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship is that little black hole most people will not encourage you to go to because they don't understand it.
Yeah.
And I get that they don't understand it, because it's a lot easier just to be, just to go to a 9 to 5. Like I cut somebody out of my life this year, which, is something people with autism don't want to do. But it reached a point where he made a comment about my father. Since my parents had been divorced from a young age, when I was 5, they divorced. He said to me, as somebody whose parents stayed together their whole lives, your father sounds rather chaotic. So in text message, I basically said to him in a clapback way, wow, this coming from somebody whose parents have been together, all his entire life. You shouldn't be making comments, to somebody about a topic that you do not understand. He got really steamed with me and hasn't spoken to me since. But the second comment that I made to him, which is at this point where he acknowledged that he and I had differences, I said, I'm an adult now. I'm under no obligation to keep you around if you are not capable of being nice to me or understanding. Not the easiest thing to say, not something I would ever do to somebody, but it got to that point because, when it comes to friendships, especially being an entrepreneur, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, you're right. We spend a lot of time alone doing these kind of things because not everyone understands why we do.
Yeah, well said, man. You're onto something there, and I appreciate the sense of boundaries. It's not easy.
No, it isn't easy to set. No one likes setting boundaries. Whether you're autistic, whether you're neurotype, or whether you're neurodivergent, nobody wants to do it, but sometimes, unfortunately, you have to. So you mentioned your little coaching service, which I'm assuming came from baseball, correct? The ability to coach people on making a better podcast?
Maybe, yeah.
That service exactly?
Well, I mean, right now I have, it's weird. You hear coaches all the time on social media. They're like, we're at capacity. We're only have one spot left, and they're trying to build scarcity and things like that. But I'm trying to be more like you with boundaries, right? And I've realized that like there's only so many days in a week that I can realistically coach. So I've kind of carved out these places, and I'm trying to work with people who are referred to me and people that, come from a trusted place, as you mentioned that word earlier. So right now I have kind of a set of clients that range from the long term. I'm working with someone for a year, which has to do with communication, trying to help this person kind of just become a better communicator overall, to some short-term engagements with a group of people that are talking about AI, and they just need their keynote more organized, more sharp, more pithy. So I'm able to basically find the common thread, which is a busy entrepreneur or founder that has a lot on the line, whether they're selling a book, course, a product, a service, or they need to communicate with their people better. And they'll come to me, and we'll carve out kind of a custom experience for them to try to reach where they're at. And it's a place where I don't know if I ever thought I'd have this many clients at one time, being very delicate about who I take on. You can't help everybody, as a teacher.
No, you really can't help everybody. I mean, you can post generalized content and give questionable advice, but for the people you want to invest your own time in and helping, you also have to understand that they're a person too. For example, I agreed with my friend to do her program this year. Finally, it wasn't that in past years I couldn't do anything with her. It's just until I moved to the apartment now, my expenses were not under control because of my last living situation. Now, because it's a loan and I'm able to pay it off on a monthly basis, I can justify doing it because with an apartment, it's become a little more manageable, even though it looks expensive at first. So I'm able to invest in myself, which actually brings up a great point since you're running a podcast. Do you find yourself having to do additional reskilling separate from being a teacher for this? Like, for example, taking courses in podcasting?
I'm trying to think of the last course I took. I actually had someone just yesterday reach out, and they want me to try their course. And you never know what anyone's up to, right? But my version of reskilling has been in hiring a couple of coaches myself. I felt that if I was going to get out there and offer my services at a relatively premium price, I have to be able to deliver more than, like, if you think of value on the simplest terms, it's got to be worth a lot more than you're paying for it.
That word, by the way, I can name 3 words on LinkedIn or social media that are the most butchered words ever. Value, that's number 1. That is my top 3. That is in my top 3.
I hope I used it correctly. Go ahead.
I'll tell you afterwards. Number 3, value. Number 2, networking, which nobody ever frigging explains because there are 2 different types of networking. There's what you and I are doing, even though it's digital, and we were referred through a mediary to where we could eventually, say, hey, let's meet up for coffee, sometime, to get to know each other offline as well, which is what social media was supposed to be about to begin with. Mm-hmm. Or there's the old way, which my best friend last year grilled me for this year with social media. He's like, you spend too much time online. I'm like, adding up in my head. So you want me to basically spend a load of money to basically go from event to event, trying to collect people's cards on people I'm probably never going to talk to again, even though, I have the cards and I've thought about it. I may reach out to some people, over the last year with networking events, even with the mastermind. Did I follow up with most people? No, because it takes a lot of energy when you're doing other things. So in a way, he might not want to admit it out loud, but what do you think's easier? What we're doing right here with LinkedIn. You do the digital networking to get the person to come offline and do something like this. It saves time, it saves gas, it saves money.
Well said. Yeah, I think you nailed it. And one of the coaches that I hired, she got me thinking about like back to boundaries. What do I say no to? Be more organized. How can you make people aware of what you do? Charge what you want to do it with for, and as long as it's a tremendous value exchange, then don't worry about the price. Like things like that you can figure out, right? Who can pay for it? I started to mention earlier, as a teacher, charging people for anything does not come natural. You're thinking
No,
you should just be
it
giving
doesn't.
people everything. I want to tutor everyone for free. I want to stay after school. I want to give you extra help. And then you work in the corporate space and it's like, no, a company is going to make a lot of money because of their ability to be good on a panel or a podcast. You should get a share of that value exchange. And it kind of goes that way.
Exactly. And it's funny because I'm looking at UW professional programs. I could list one to you right now if I was able to find it, but basically, hold on just one more second because I'm close to it. They had a couple of podcast courses that are valued a little differently that you can do online. I mean, I might take them in the new year, to get better at storytelling, because the one thing I think that you and I definitely will probably likely both agree on huge, podcasting is not just marketing, but it's storytelling.
Yeah. It's a great example of that. I don't know how much you've seen of this, but I get so many ads on social media that I don't know what's legit, what's not, what's good, what's strategic. Lately, one of my favorite films of all time, sentimentally, is Field of Dreams, and obviously, it hits people differently, different
Oh,
ways.
that's a classic baseball movie. If
Yeah,
you build it, they will come.
exactly. And I got an ad on Instagram that said like there's a podcast out about the movie. Now the movie came out in '88 or '89, and I'm like, what? What? This makes no sense to me.
I was only probably 2, 3 years old back at that point.
Yeah,
Or
and
four.
so this morning I find myself listening to this podcast, which I think people would really enjoy, and it's 12 episodes about how Field of Dreams started out as a short story, should have never been a book, but became a book, was based on a book, became a movie that should have never been, and each episode shares another story that unravels. And now he's having this moment on Instagram. Now that I said it and they're listening to us, you'll see it in your phone later. And all of a sudden, he's got a podcast coming out of it. So he's doing the marketing, the storytelling, the branding, all wrapped up into one about an event that happened 35 years ago. It's an amazing thing to watch.
I'm sure it is. And that's also because of the introduction of AI, you can do things like this now. I mean, I'm looking at filters on Instagram. I'm like, this is clearly being done by generative AI.
Yes.
I mean, one thing Geraldine and I discussed last week, which my mom might sort of say I might be a little too opinionated on it, is the introduction of AI into our lives. I'm not necessarily against it. Geraldine and I even discussed, I'm sort of a skeptic with it, but I think what my mom, where I'm coming from is I would hope that as we start to advance with technology, AI is put in responsibly into the country.
Yeah.
What I unfortunately see might happen the next 4 years, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they're about to introduce it to much faster, which is going to displace a lot of people.
It'll
which
be
I
interesting.
don't know if I completely agree with. I would like to see it done in a way that makes sense and that still keeps people, actively employed, able to earn money.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where it goes next because there's some amazing things about it, and then you see those wonky videos and you're like, what are we doing here?
Well, if you, we can end here and show our age sort of with it. But remember the Transformers movies?
Yeah.
Remember all the movies in the late to mid 2000s, which sadly sort of predicted all of this? I think when we look back at some of those movies, like I, Robot with Will Smith, The Island with Ewan McGregor, the Transformer movies, it was pointing out we should really be introducing technology responsibly, but if we do it too fast, this is what could happen.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
I mean, I didn't even think about it when I was watching those movies as a kid, but when I look back on some of what I was looking at as a kid now as an adult, I'm like, wait a second, this is what they were probably trying to tell us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even when you had people like Elon Musk say AI has to be introduced in a responsible way, yet do we think he's going to probably do it? No. Which is why I always find it funny with corporate CEOs where I'm like, you sound nice, but what you're doing is being a hypocrite.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah, exactly. So I do appreciate you coming by tonight. This was a lot of fun. I loved hearing your story, and I'm glad to know that you're chasing the dream while you're still teaching English and in the school system. And what I want to leave on is I want you to tell us what the 1% podcast is all about so that I can tune into it and others can tune into it.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I just celebrated episode 300. I have this nice round number hanging there right now. I haven't done a new episode recently. My 14-year-old son was my last guest. And I don't know. If you would have told me in 2014 when I started podcasting that I would do 300 episodes of that podcast, a coaching business would come out of it. I would have dinners and meet people from who knows where. I would get a former student, maybe this is a great place to end, a former student of mine who is launching her podcast this month, asking me for help. It's just been a really rewarding experience. And you can go on any podcast player and you type out all the words. I didn't use any numbers because I didn't know what the heck I was doing with branding. 1% Better Project.com. You can find it. You can find me at damngoodconversations.com. But if you just type in ONE% better, that podcast will be everywhere. We just recently, use your words, rebranded the cover art. And it would mean a lot to me if someone listened to an episode. And don't go back to episode one. Go to 300 and work backwards. Listen to the good stuff. Don't go back to when I was figuring it all out. Listen to episode 300 and then type in a word. How about this? I'll end with this story, Ben. I had a former colleague text me the other day when I was taking a walk because I was upset about the Christmas lights not working. And she said, I found your podcast, episode 81, because I typed in mental toughness podcasts. She said the episode popped up and she listened to it. I looked back. It was a 2019 episode. She had found it randomly, was not even looking for mine. That's the power of what you're doing here. Publishing without knowing who is listening. Having the courage to put it out there, try to deliver one of your favorite words, some value for people, and see what happens. And that's the power of bringing us together. So thanks to James Harnedy, and thanks to you for inviting me.
Of course, Joe. And I do a panel before we log off. I do panel discussions also. So I'll send you a list of topics and you tell me which ones you would like to participate in, because that's the beauty of this other project is I run that, panel discussion as well. For the last year, basically, I just got to 105 videos. Ask me 2 years ago why I started doing this in the first place. Originally, the idea was create another income. Then it called to now I'm happy enough doing this, where I can add a service. But originally the idea was I wanted to start a business on my own. Then I wanted to learn from different people, much like yourself, along the way. And since I did get to 105 videos, you know, if you look at me now versus when I started, where I wanted to profit, you know, quickly as possible, now it's just like I can ride it out because I'm at a point in my life where, you know, I'm not content with the job, but I'm content with the setup where I can do things like this.
It's inspiring.
And yeah. All right, my friend, we will be in contact. All right. Thank you
Thank
for
you
coming
so
by
much.
Autism Experience podcast.
Take care.
You too.